The housing market is starting to shift. We've seen interest rates rise. At the same time, we've seen supply start to build, and buyer demand is dropping. So should you buy now or should you wait? It's a scary time at the moment to be a buyer in this housing market because no one wants to buy a home that is going to depreciate in value, that's going to be worth less in the future. So a lot of buyers are wondering whether or not right now is the best opportunity for them to get into the market. So in today's video, we're going to spend a little bit of time and talk about buying in a changing market, how you as a buyer should look at it, some things you can do in order to help your offer get accepted, and more importantly, some things to think about if you're considering buying a home in 2022. Now, I always like to start these videos and remind you that real estate's local. So depending on what's happening in your market might, impact how you approach some of the things that we talk about in this video. So just make sure you're abreast of what's going on in your market so you can make the right decisions for you. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a crazy housing market, a market where homes have appreciated nearly 35 to 40% in just a 2-year period. And at the same time, you hear stories of multiple offers, people going well above the asking price, waiving contingencies, doing all of these crazy things. So it's scary to be a buyer in this market, especially coming in and not having additional funds. Maybe you have, a small down payment and you're scared. You're scared to waive contingencies. You're scared to pay more for a property because at the end of the day, you don't want to end up owing more on that property than it's worth. And it's a fearful time for many, many reasons out there. We just had the Fed come out and raise the Fed funds rate 50 basis points. And at the same time, they've said that they're likely going to continue doing that until they get inflation under control. So we know inflation's out of control. We know that interest rates have been on the rise. And at the same time, you're hearing global issues, people talking about a crash. So it is definitely a scary time in the housing market. But I personally believe, as somebody that owns real estate, bullish on real estate, been doing this nearly 20 years, there are definitely some things that you need to consider when thinking whether or not it's the right time for you. The first thing I want to point out in this video is that making these decisions isn't watching someone on YouTube like myself or reading a media headline and deciding that you're not going to buy because of that. It really comes down to, is it the right time in your life to own a home? Maybe you have a growing family. Maybe you just got married. Maybe you have multiple kids, or, there's a lot of reasons to want to own property, but it's always got to be the right time for you. It's not always the right time for everyone to own a home. In fact, it's not always a great time to buy real estate in general, just because of how things have appreciated and what have you. So, I want to be clear here, buying property has risk, but you can avoid some of those risks if you have a longer term time horizon. This is something I talk about in a lot of videos. And I want to stress it now because we've seen the market appreciate so much and we see things changing, every day with regards to the economy and, global wars and pandemics and all of this stuff. Having a longer term time horizon allows you to withstand any bumps in the road. In fact, a lot of people want to compare what we're going through right now to the last housing debacle back in 2008. Well, the difference between that and this is like night and day. In fact, that was the only time in history where the housing market actually caused a recession. And even then, within a 5-7 year period, a lot of those homes that had depreciated half in value had come back up to what they were worth. And so when I talk about a longer term time horizon, I'm talking merely from the point of having it allows bumps in the road. If homes do pull back in value or depreciate at some point in the future, having that long-term time horizon allows you to stay put, allows you to focus on making your monthly payment. Hopefully you have a fixed rate loan on that mortgage whenever you decide to purchase. And so you just focus on making your monthly payment. And unless you have to move, there's no loss, right? Because you have that longer term time horizon. And that's something I want to be clear on. There's too many people out there at the moment in the market worried about the value of their property tomorrow. Why are you worried about what your property is going to be worth tomorrow if you plan on being in that property 7 or 10 years? Historically speaking, we've only ever really had one crash in real estate ever, and that was back in '08. And if you had that longer term time horizon, well, you were able to withstand that that crash, if you will, and you were able to make it out of that time without getting too beat up. Now, it doesn't mean it wasn't a scary time, because it was, but those that had the longer term time horizon were able to withstand it. So that's something that I'm stressing now, because we've seen the appreciation that we have. And looking back historically at real estate, it's averaged about 5% per year for the last 60 years. But when you see a market that appreciates 20% year over year, at some point, if it's going to regress back to that trend line of 5%, you're likely to see some pullbacks in prices. So again, having the longer term time horizon allows you to withstand any of that craziness that could happen in the market. Now, for those of you who watch my channel, I'm not a crasher. I don't believe you're going to see any big pullbacks in real estate. I think at some point you do see home prices decline, but not significantly. So buying versus waiting is really going to come down to whether or not it makes sense for you based on the time of your life. Now, if you only have 2 or 3 years that you plan on being in a property and you're going to sell it, I would tell you probably not a good time to buy a property unless you plan on turning that property into a rental or something at some point in the future. So just know what you're trying to accomplish and don't so much worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. Just focus on, can you make the monthly payment? Do you have a stable job? Are you comfortable with that payment? Do you have money in reserves in case something does happen, in case you do lose your job? Are you able to continue making that payment? Those are the things that are important. I bought my property back in 2012. Now, granted, I'm a real estate agent, but I haven't really paid attention to the value of that property for a long period of time, just because I was focused on making the mortgage payment and, living my life with my family and what have you. Now, as real estate started to appreciate and go crazy, I was aware of the value, but I can honestly say if values had declined, I wouldn't have really been affected because I was comfortable making the monthly payment. I didn't plan on moving, and life would have just continued to move forward. So just make sure if you're buying in this market, you're considering all of those things. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the market's starting to change a little bit. We're starting to see a little bit more inventory. Buyer demand has slowed a little bit because there are some affordability issues out there, people getting priced out of the market. Therefore, you got less buyers out there that you're competing against. So with that said, how do you approach this market? Well, what I've seen in listings that I've had and working with buyers is it's still competitive. It doesn't mean that just because you see a little bit more inventory that you're going to be able to offer significantly less on a property or that you're going to be able to go in and get a deal, because that's not the case. But you are likely going to have more options when choosing property. You're not going to have to accept the one. You might have multiple options in neighborhoods now versus just 2 or 3. And that's a good thing for buyers. Us as real estate agents like to see a more normal market, and that's what we're heading in. But it's going to be a long time before it transitions into a buyer's market. So if you're a buyer out there at the moment, just know what people are doing in your area. Here in my local market, I'm seeing less people waive contingencies, less people waive, the appraisal contingency, less people waive inspection contingencies. Homes are selling closer to the asking price versus going way above the asking price. But at the same time, you might be in a market where there's a ton of inventory and you're able to, maybe offer less than the asking price on that property. Or maybe you're in a market where there's still 10, 15 offers on a property. So it's important that you know your market, and how you're going to do that is working with a professional in that market, someone that understands the market, can guide you through that process, help you know exactly how to approach things so that you can make the best decision for you. But I think as we move closer into the summer market, inventory is going to continue to build. It's going to give you more options as a buyer. And you're going to have to get less crazy when making those offers. Probably closer to fair market value will get you an acceptance. In fact, I've had several people reach out to me recently saying, I finally got my offer accepted. Well, it's because you've got a little bit less competition. You got a little bit more property to choose from. So all of these buyers aren't vying for one property. They're vying for several properties, which gives you a little bit better option in order to get your offer accepted. But ultimately, the question of buying now or waiting is really a personal one. It's not something I can answer for you. It's not something that the media can answer for you. It's not something that likely anyone other than you and your family can answer, because it really comes down to where you are in your life in making that decision. But again, I'll reiterate, having the longer term time horizon is important. Having money in the bank is important. Being able to make that payment comfortably is important, especially in the environment we're in, because you could see home prices pull back at some point in the future. And you don't want to be in a position where if you have to sell, you're upside down on that equity. So thinking from a longer term perspective will allow you to make the best decisions. But if you're watching this still wondering whether or not you should buy now, I filmed this video just a couple of months back where I talk about this in a little bit more detail. Do me a favor, check it out here. But for now, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. I appreciate the support. Hope to see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.